What's going on, everybody? This is Masaki from State 43, and today we're going to talk about Gol Goroth, the boss that is a raid boss. It's the first raid boss of this game. It's actually very exciting. He's very fun to play against. At this point, it does look like the raid is over, but I'm making this guide just in case this is not a one-time event and it's like an event that's going to go on. You know, you're going to get another version of this or maybe something else. I did notice at the end of towards the end of the event, they were adding some elements into the map that says something like, if I clicked on it, there's like a tombstone or something on the top, bottom left corner that if I clicked on it, it says something like not available in this update. So it does seem like they're going to have this event in the future as well. So that's very exciting. So Gol Goroth can actually be kind of a difficult event if you don't know what you're doing. So that's the whole point here, is we're going to walk over the guide so you can earn lots of rewards. So what is it? Gol Goroth is a 5-man raid, and the idea here is that you're going to be fighting with your team of 5 players against the boss, and you're going to take down him as fast as possible, and that's how you get your rewards. So what are the rewards that you're going to get? So first is you're going to get a daily reward. This is basically given for your first clear. It doesn't really, you don't have to go through all the difficulties for the daily. You just have to go through the highest difficulty, which I recommend just do the insane one, and you're going to get the rewards for all the other tiers as well. And then, of course, there are ranking rewards. There's a daily ranking and there's a overall event ranking. But basically, that's based on the time. So whatever time you're able to hit with your team, that's the time that's going to be recorded into the weekly ranking or daily ranking, and you're given a reward based on that. And of course, lastly, basically, the more people you have playing this event, the more you're going to get for your alliance ranking points-wise. So that's going to just help you get more rewards from that as well. It's very similar to how plague zones work with respect to that. All right, so for this event, we do have to cover a couple of general things before we talk about the boss overall guide. There is a special rally in this event called Instant Rally. How that works is that there is no rally time specifically for the rally if all players join. So the moment you set up a rally, it's a 1-minute rally, and all the players send their troops to you. The moment everybody's troops arrive, then your rally is going to launch. It doesn't wait another, like, let's say 30 seconds more if it doesn't have to. So that's how instant rally works. It's very, very important. And for this fact, you should always try to stick together with other players, because that means your rally is going to arrive faster. And more rallies tend to mean more damage for the boss and, you know, more time for more rallies in general. Okay. All attacks, rallies, or solos in Phase 1, Phase 2 before the 40-minute mark does spawn proliferates, or they look like infected dudes. Basically, they do one of two things. The red ones are going to debuff you by sending a march against your settlement. Don't worry too much about being attacked. It's not going to burn your settlement or anything like that. But you're going to get a debuff once that red one hits you. The green ones give a buff to the boss. Basically, the other thing to note is you kind of want to sometimes minimize the amount of attacks on the boss, which will spawn less proliferates. But from my testing, it actually kind of benefits to have more of them, because it gives you more chances to get everybody in the team like buffs, which is kind of useful for this raid. So in some ways, hitting the boss frequently is not necessarily a bad thing, as long as your raid team knows how to deal with the proliferate infected dudes. Okay, you are also given a free relocator that charges every 30 seconds. This is very similar to Reservoir, if you played that. Basically, every 30 seconds, you're going to get a, the free relocator is available, which allows you to relocate somewhere on this map. So what do you do with that? Well, the idea here is you can use the relocator for 2 reasons. One is during the Phase 2 Vine phase. You can dodge the vines with a free relocator, which is nice. When you get vine, you can use it to kind of like jump to a different location, which will prevent the vines from taking you to a different place. We'll explain all that when we get to Phase 2. The other thing you can use the relocator for is you can actually use it to recall all of your marchers back. So what I do with that is on Phase 1 and 3, you can actually use the relocator to jump around the map, which allows you to quickly get all your marches back. So the moment they hit the boss, they're going to try to return home, which will probably be like around 14 seconds or so. In that moment, you could just use the free relocator and get all of your marches back quickly. Now, be careful with that, because if you have guys who are part of a rally or marching, they're also going to get canceled, which means technically then you're not doing that damage. So be really careful about that. Now, if you have a very coordinated team, you can totally use the free relocators to get your marches back with that. Okay, so let's talk about how the fight works. In general, all of this guide is going to be about the insane difficulty, so I'm not going to cover the other difficulties. Basically, it's just going to be similar but easier. Okay, so the boss starts phase 1. You're going to get a 10-second countdown timer, and then phase 1 begins. Phase 1 is pretty straightforward. The boss doesn't really do much, if anything. You will then be able to kind of send marches against the boss right away. Now, I wouldn't recommend for phase 1 doing any solo marches. Again, you don't want to spawn too many of the proliferates early if you can. What I would recommend for phase 1 is set up a bunch of rallies, right? So every single settlement should rally the boss, which means there are 5 rallies total. And if everybody then joins those 5 rallies, everybody's reserved for 5 march slots. Now, what do you do with the 6th? Pretty straightforward. Right at the beginning of the fight, there are going to be 5 proliferates, and those are the debuffing kind, that are going to be spawned. They're going to send some troops to your base. Now, once those troops hit, they're going to debuff your base. So just send a march against those red proliferates, which will remove the debuff. It's pretty straightforward, pretty easy. It depends on your damage, but in general, if you're doing about like 2% per rally, then phase 1 is going to be down about 2 to 3 rounds of rallying by all 5 members, which equates to about 15 rallies or so. Of course, what I often do is I will send a march. So if you send a march against the proliferates, when it comes back, send that same march against the boss, just do a little extra damage. And then of course that generates a proliferate, which then you could use the march to go and kill. So like once you get into the flow of how phase 1 works, it's pretty straightforward how that kind of just works itself out. Phase 2, which is kind of going to be the longer phase, is basically initiates when the boss is at 75% health. Once the boss hits 75% health, you're going to see that there's like some messaging on the screen that shows you you're in phase 2. In addition, you're going to see the boss kind of makes a motion to downward thrust once in a while. So he thrusts vines down into the ground, and they're going to spawn vines around your base. You're going to see them visually around your settlement. Now, what's going to happen then is you're going to get pulled under if you don't do something about that within about, I think about 5 seconds or so. During that 5 seconds, if you have a relocator or you have a free relocator, you can relocate to any other spot on the map, and then you will not be affected by the vine. Now, you have to act pretty fast. So for this phase, it's kind of like what I would do normally is I would almost always, once I finish sending out my marches, etc., I would, make sure the free relocator is on cooldown already. I would click somewhere and just have it ready, because the moment I see vines, I'm jumping. Like I don't have to go and like click on the relocator, find a spot, and then click, whatever, warp or whatever, click on the free button. I'm already ready to go. So that's what I would recommend you to do as well. Have the relocator ready and just be able to jump the moment you see the vines on yourself. Now, if you do get vined, there's a couple things. What happens is basically you are now disabled. You can only make 1 march against yourself. So the spot where you were will turn into kind of like a green pool liquid thing. So your allies can actually help you out with the vines as well. So if they see the green spot, they can send a march towards it, and it will release you as well. In addition, if you're about to be vined and there are cases where maybe your relocator is on cooldown, you can't really jump, then you can actually preemptively send your march against your spot. So you'll kind of see me do this throughout this video, but basically where, I see myself getting pulled down and I click on my green spot. And before even the animation shows where I get ported over to the side of the map, I already have a march going towards there, and that's okay too. So you should always send the march, because sometimes your friend who's helping you might get vined before their march reaches you, which will cancel their march, and of course then you're vined for longer. And if you're vined, you can't be doing damage to the boss, so that's why you should send the solo march yourself. Now, For phase 2, stop rallying right away and only send solos to the boss. Simply because the vines are going to cancel your rallies. It's never going to be... the vines can take up to 4 players out of commission, so it's really just not worth it. At phase 2, you should be sending like 3-ish marches against the boss. And then, of course, using 2-ish marches against proliferates that are summoned. And then 1 or 2 to kind of help your friends. So be ready for that as well for phase 2. Again, just keep sending solos. The vines will stop at around 40 minutes on the game clock. That's the clock at the top. So, yeah, it's going to get easier, but obviously the vine phase it's pretty annoying. If you can jump around, then obviously you're saving a lot of time. Okay, so once you get the boss worked down to around 40%, then the boss is going to go to phase 3. Now, remember, just because phase 3 activates, it does not mean that phase 2, the vines end. The vines might still be active even when phase 3 starts. So phase 3 is going to happen is the boss is going to summon a green and a purple tumor around the map. That's kind of like the 2 purple spots you see on the map. They're going to have tumors grow out of them. Now, these tumors have 2 different purposes. Now, the green tumor will buff the boss. So it's going to give it a stress... what's called stress protection mode buff, which basically buffs the boss where every attack makes the boss like have higher defense, so he takes less damage. Pretty straightforward. To remove this buff, simply hit the green tumor. Now, there's another tumor on the map, the purple tumor, and the purple tumor kind of like protects the green one. So normally you don't need to hit the purple too much, but when the green tumor gets hit too many times, and that time is usually 5 times, then the purple tumor will be available for you to hit, and then the green tumor will kind of go underground, protected. When that happens, the boss still can get buffed by the green tumor, but you can't remove it because you can't hit the thing when it's under the ground. So you have to hit the purple tumor, which will then bring the green tumor back up again. So for this phase, basically, if you still have to deal with vines, continue to solo march, continue to do the same things you were doing in phase 2. With some marches going to help players, some marches kind of working on the boss, and some marches working on the proliferates, those infected things that get spawned. Now, one of the players, I recommend 1 to 2 players, should be dedicated to the tumors. What that I mean by that is they should just basically relocate next to the tumor and sit there. Closer to the green tumor is preferable, but some spot between the green and the purple is where you should be. Now, what you should do is you should send 5 marches against the green, and then after those 5 are sent, the 1 march will go to the purple. Now, this is only for the player that's sitting next to the tumors. The other players should be sending marches and rallies against the boss. Now, don't rally again until the vine phase is over, but otherwise solo marches. And so about 5 attacks and the green tumor goes into hiding mode. When that happens, you should send your march against purple. Now, if you time this properly, you can actually have the march going towards the purple before the green goes underneath. So it really minimizes the time that the green tumor is protected. Yeah, that's pretty much phase 3. Once you hit 40 minutes on the clock, then the vines stop and you can then start doing rallies. And that's, safe to do that then. Okay, so let's talk about some of the etc. stuff. So troop formations don't matter at all in this battle. Just go ahead and use the default that they recommend. Because it's more important to send the marches faster than to have the perfect troop formation. Now, I've done a little bit damage testing. It does look like that troop formations kind of matter, but it only matters by a little bit. And again, it's more beneficial to have and make sure that you have a march going at the boss than to make sure you have the right troop formations. Phase 3. Players can actually help the tumor like dedicated player by just, if you have an extra march, send it against the green tumor or send it against the purple tumor. That just helps the player that's focusing on tumors by a lot, especially if you're in vine phase, when that player who's sitting by the tumor could be vined. And if that happens, of course, rescue them right away because they're helping, that player is helping you to debuff the boss, which is really, really important. When attacking spawns, make sure you hit the ones that are closer to you. So if you see a line going towards a spawn, don't send your march against it. It's kind of a waste of time. Either send it towards the boss or send it towards another spawn. Right after the vine, you can march against the boss. So what this means is if somebody hits your vine and you stop seeing that like green animation around your view range, you can actually send a march against the boss right away without even your animation. It doesn't even look like you're back on the map yet, but the marches will launch. So you can do it and save yourself another like 2-3 seconds. Okay, relocating gives you instant recall of your troops. Just make sure you remember that. So be really careful here on this map. You can accidentally use your normal relocator, which will, basically take those out of for you, which is not as good. So just make sure like you're being really careful. When you relocate, click on the button that's on the bottom right corner of the screen, rather than hitting on a spot and hitting relocate, because they will more likely use your actual relocator for that. Some damage check numbers just to understand like how you're doing. Usually each rally should take down about 2.5% of the boss's HP. Basically, if you want to think about this entire fight in rallies, this means that the entire fight is going to be done with 40 rallies total. Okay. So given that, I think like 8 minutes is probably the best possible time for this boss. So don't quote me on that. I'm just, again, napkin math, thinking about what the best time is if you want to compare how you're doing against the best time. Theoretically possible. Solos are about 1% each hit. Again, this is like, we're talking about plasma troops, plasma 6 or 7-ish or 8s. Okay, so lastly, I do want to cover this really important point about a bug. When I was playing this, especially in phase 3, I noticed that some of the infected, so the spawns, don't actually show up on the map. So you're not able to hit them. But usually what you can tell is you can see a line coming towards you from seemingly nowhere, right? And you'll also notice on the debuff bar in your top left corner, you'll notice there's a debuff that's like, for example, giving you minus 400% damage or something like that. This is a bug. This is just where if you are not able to remove it, remove the bug, remove the debuff, you basically won't do any damage to the boss. So the way to kind of fix this is just to quit the game, reload the game, rejoin the raid, which is available for you. And then you're going to be able to see the infected spawned, and then you can kill them and then remove the debuff. So yeah, that's pretty important. Honestly, if you get bugged, it could really mess with your time. For our raid, we were able to hit a 13:16 time for us. It's really, really good time. And in general, just following the basic rules and knowledge that I've covered in this video, you should be able to hit that kind of numbers yourself as well. And lastly, I just want to cover this. My overall thinking about this event is it's really fun. It's very dynamic. I love raids and I love these mechanics. So I really hope they put more content like this into the game. It really breaks up the game where it's mostly very inactive, very passive. I do like the fact that it's a very active part of this game. It does require some coordination though if you want to rank pretty high. So I hope you enjoyed this video. This is Masaki from State 43. Everyone, stay classy.